Good morning. Just changed chip to English. Let's start with a reflection. We've seen that. We've seen that on the social medias. We've seen it on Facebook. And we see it a lot. Not true. We are responsible. We are responsible for what the other person hears. We're a lawyer. We're trying to explain a contract. We're salesmen. We're just trying to communicate to the other person. We must understand what the other person understands. It is our responsibility. When people ask me what I do, I sometimes explain, I teach people how to speak their own language. I give them ideas about how to speak their own language. At school, we might learn English. We might learn French. We might learn grammar. We'll study literature. But who actually tells us how to structure our own language to better communicate? Because we have words. Words are building blocks. Words are pillars. Words are what we use. Words are what you're hearing today. Words are the highway, maybe the supernet, the hypernet, that allows us to communicate our emotions, our feelings, our thoughts to everyone. So sometimes we ask ourselves the question, how do we learn? Why do we learn a word? Why do we use a word? And maybe we can look to change, modify, or fine-tune the words we use to better communicate. Emotional communication is the understanding of the emotion within the word we're using, how we perceive it, and how that emotion is received by the other person. Whether it's written, spoken, sung, whether it is in an advert, a blog, or a web page. If we communicate emotionally aware of what we're saying, we communicate more efficiently. We are emotional beings. I'm nervous. You guys are listening. There's emotion. We grow through emotion. We react through emotion. We buy through emotion. We change country through emotion. We are emotional beings. And right from then, we receive sounds. These sounds are words. These sounds have nothing whatsoever to do with what they're saying it is. For example, the duo syllable mountain has absolutely nothing whatsoever to do with mountains. In the same way that the Catalan muntanya has absolutely nothing to do, the sound, with the words. We begin to hear these words. They're coming at us. They're coming at us. And slowly, 9 months, 15 months, 18 months, we begin to use sounds back to help us survive. Something might simply be mama. Something might simply be hot, water, thirsty. We use them to get on with how we're trying to live our lives. So that as we get older, we're able to communicate better. As we get older, we learn to communicate and transmit with these sounds with other people. Now, when words enter, they enter here and they enter here. They enter what we call an emotional dictionary. When we hear a sound or when we give a sound out, the word, that word we look for in our mind before we transmit it. Now, these words will vary in our lives. For example, a good example is the word home, hogar or llar. The word home varies through our lives from when we're children. You hear the word home, you use the word home, you feel at home. When you leave home, home is different. Home might be a student apartment. Home might be another country. If we live in the sub-Sahara desert, home is a different feeling, a different idea. Now, that because when we go through life, we feel a change in the word and the meaning of the word. That's what we tend to call our micro-perception of the word. There is something called a macro-perception, and that is when society changes the meaning of the word for us. Let me use an example. We have smartphones. We're all now at 4G. Before, it was 3G, because we live post-2010. Now, if we were around in America, or we were following the space program in the 60s and the 70s, and we heard 3G or 4G, we would think 3 times gravitational pull. I don't know how many of you here were around in the 60s and the 70s. I certainly remember he pulled a 10G. Okay? So society, the macro change of the meaning of the word, changes the way we perceive it. And that's exactly what happens. We have a perception of a word, a meaning, and someone else has a perception. Is it the same? So when we speak, when we talk, when we hear, are we hearing what is spoken? So, let's take a look at the actual act of communication. Setting aside the intent, there are 4 steps in what happens with the word or the sound. The word is spoken. It creates this image. The mind, the emotional dictionary, looks for some form of reference to tell us what the word means. With that image, we have an emotion. Is our emotion the same as the other person's emotion? There's another thing. I'd like to take an extra minute just to explain here, because emotion about the word can also be emotion when we actually receive it or when we actually give it. For example, a teacher just before lunch with his class, especially 14, 15, 16-year-olds, just before lunch, they're all hungry. They're looking at the clock. They're not emotionally connected fully to what the teacher's saying. We've just come back from having coffee. We've had a break. We've relaxed. We're emotionally perhaps more perceptive and receptive to what I'm saying now. If you're giving a session as a coach in a company and you've got smokers in front of you, at about an hour and 45 minutes, you've basically lost them. Okay? So the emotion of the word and the emotion of transmission or reception modifies slightly the way we might perceive what it means. Now that provokes a consequence. If we think about work, we think about lawyers trying to explain something, we think about doctors trying to explain something. If the word that enters us, we have no reference, we get, with a doctor, worried. What does that mean? Okay? So, we go right back to the perception. Have we transmitted with our words the perception, the meaning, the consequence that we want? And here we get to the next point. Are we really listening? Are we listening to the sound that comes at us? Do we understand what the other person means? Because listening is an active experience. You must concentrate to listen. Approximately 250 words can be spoken per minute. Some languages go faster, some languages go slower. So 250 words a minute is what we can speak at, but we can listen at 500. And by listening at 500, we have a gap between what comes in and what we're able to absorb. So we have got this noise in our head. Silence, you can be silent when you're listening. But how much extra is going up there? How much are you thinking about the fact that you're just about to make a payment on your mortgage, or your car's broken and you can't get to where you wanted to this evening? The silence is not just not speaking. Silence is eliminating that movie that's going on in your brain. By eliminating it, you receive more freely the words that come to you. You learn when you're silent. And he will also say, silence sometimes is the best answer. Now what I'd like to do is I'd like to give 3 hot tips about what can be done now, immediately, to improve the way you can communicate with others, transmitting or receiving. The first we can do is eliminate the negative. Now, words can be negative, words like crisis, rape, words that are bad, but we can also have that negative energy as we're trying to deliver the message. What we need to try and do is look towards structuring things in a positive way. Now, strangely enough, there is something I hear a lot in this area, is cap problema. No problem. What we've done is we've used a negative in what we're trying to say is positive. There's another thing we hear a lot. Never give up. How long is never? And what about giving up? Giving up in itself is negative. That's the most negative word you can think of. No in itself is a stop, it's a block, it's a prevention. When someone says, what do you think of that? No, I don't like it. You've now got to negotiate around the no. So if we could try and look to eliminate no when we receive information, we keep the flow of the conversation, the flow of the interchange of information moving. Let's bring in the positive. Positives are, of course, yes. Positives are when, for example, someone is presenting a proposal to you to repair your house, or a proposal to repair your car, or you are a boss with someone who's bringing in some information about the project you're working on. When the person gives you the information, don't say, no, I don't like that, no, that's not right. It's, how did you get to that? Tell me why that happened. Okay? A very, very positive thing that people like, because positive conversation motivates, stimulates, and continues the dialogue, is simply, I like that. Tell me how you got that. We also say in English, control the imprecise. That's avoid the relative. Now, what is the relative? What is the imprecise? Relative is everything related to us, and it is typically adjectives. Relative or imprecise are basically adjectives. For example, I have long hair, but she has short hair. I put the paperwork into the government and they said, it'll be quick. When do I get the paperwork back? It's quick. But what is quick to me and what is quick to her? One way we can say, your products will arrive really quickly, you'll get them on Friday before midday, because we're controlling the imprecise. We define the imprecise. We say, products will arrive on Friday. I want my hair short. So, with those 3 tips, eliminating the negative, by talking through the positive, and especially by defining that which is relative to you or relative to someone else, we're able to better transmit the message we want to convey. Now, here is a word that when I showed this, I sent this presentation to my mother, she saw this slide and she said, well, I knew you'd have something like that. You're passionate about this word because but is classified as a negator and an eliminator. What does it do? It negates everything just said and eliminates your real desire to hear everything afterwards. How do we learn but? Remember the face of the youngster? But Mum, I'm watching TV. But Mum, I said I was going to go out with Dave. I really agree with everything you've said, but. But comes at you and you think, he hasn't been listening, he's not interested. It also tends to negate what's about to be said. I try never to say but. Is it possible? I actually agree. So if we're able to understand the emotion within the words that we use, whether they're nouns, substantives, whether they're adjectives or verbs, and we can perceive and understand what the other understands, we will communicate emotionally and communicate more efficiently. Thank you very much.